slide was happening in this mock, past the Browns, past the Giants, past the Saints to the Steelers at 21. Greg, is this a win for everybody if this happens?
Well, obviously for Shedeur, financially it wouldn't be ideal. Because you don't get that money up front, that money that everybody's looking for if you're a top 3, one of those guys picked early. However, culture-wise, stability, this would be an ideal situation. And I know some might question, well, what have the Steelers been able to do when they get quarterbacks? They haven't blossomed their quarterback picks as of late. However, Shedeur, if he's able to start, you want him to start. He would be starting with great weapons with what they have currently as it stands. With George Pickens on one side, obviously DK Metcalf, you got a solid running game, you got some veteran leadership up front with the offensive line. So you have a culture that understands how to win. They just haven't won in most meaningful football games, which we all identify as the postseason. But if you're Shedeur, this isn't ideal. And I don't know if he gets past Cleveland, which I don't know if Cleveland's going to overlook him because that need is so great there. If he gets past Cleveland and New Orleans, as you mentioned, if they don't pick Shedeur, this is where he probably ends up.
Look, a slide is an insult. A slide costs you money, so I don't like it. I love it! I love it! All right, this is where I want Shedeur. I would like him with the Giants. I love him with the Giants. But outside of that, this is where I want him. For all the reasons Greg said.
All right, what about the Aaron Rodgers?
Can I say just
go.
He could be behind Aaron Rodgers
piece of it? If I am a young if I'm someone close to Shedeur, I was going to say if I'm his dad, but his dad's Deion Sanders, so that doesn't really why do I trust that the Steelers have the infrastructure to develop a quarterback? So I know we say like, oh yeah, it's better, you slide, you go to a better team. I understand the Steelers are a good organization, but the Steelers, I don't know that I trust Arthur Smith. I don't know that I trust, with respect, Mike Tomlin as far as the offensive side of the ball to develop a quarterback. So that, you know what I mean? Like that's
I hear you.
It's not like what I think would be great for Shedeur, I didn't have it happening, but if he's on the board at 26 and the Rams are like, you know what? Stafford flirted with, retirement or whatever, a place where it's like, okay, I don't have to play for a year, offensive line, great, but I don't look at the Steelers, even though the Steelers are a good team, I don't look at it quite like that.
Yeah. So, there's a bit to unpack here with all of this. I agree with what Nick is saying in that regard. I think Mike Tomlin. So this is a more complicated answer, honestly, because on one side, I think Shedeur Sanders going to Pittsburgh, going to a city like Pittsburgh, I think it gives him enough to feel like there's a lot for him to do there, but not enough for him to kind of find himself in trouble. I think it's a good fan base. It's a passionate fan base, so he'll feel connected to it, but they're not like so ruthless. They're not like the Philadelphia fans or New York fans, etc. So I think there'll be a little bit more of a little bit more patience there. But I feel like on one side, Mike Tomlin could offer a ton to someone like a Shedeur Sanders, but I'm starting to feel like Mike Tomlin may be losing a little bit of his command of a locker room and the respect from some of these younger guys who are up and coming in the NFL. I think when you struggle to win for as long as the Steelers have, again, there's obviously going to be still a level of respect. It's not like these guys are going to be looking at Mike Tomlin as some bum and doesn't know what he's talking about. But it just feels like, some of the bravado, some of the intensity, some of the culture that Mike Tomlin brings that I personally love, it can only go so far if you keep winning. And I mean like legitimately winning, not just winning regular season games, like actually winning playoff games, competing for conference championships, etc. And, eventually people are going to be like, yeah, Mike's a good coach, but like, he's just a coach. And for a while, Mike Tomlin had this aura of being like the coach, a top coach. And I just feel like that's potentially slightly no longer as forward in the NFL as it once was. Especially when you have games where you're getting like, beat, the score might not really forecast this, but just like, yeah, they had essentially no chance against the Baltimore Ravens. Like it just wasn't even close. And they've just been kind of a mess in that regard. So I'm not so sure that Shedeur going there because, I don't know. Is Mike Tomlin definitely going to be the coach for the next 2-3 years? I don't know that at this point. I really don't. I don't know if he should be even. Like it's a weird, tricky situation. You would want Shedeur to go somewhere that truly has stability, but stability built in being competitive in the playoffs. And that's why, of course, going to the Rams would be a great spot. And I think Shedeur is the type of quarterback who I don't even want to necessarily see him go to a defensive forward team with a offensive coordinator who could be there 1 minute and be gone the next. I think he really definitely needs someone like a Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell, Kevin Stefanski. Like I'm trying to, purposely like not say like Andy Reid, because obviously Andy Reid. But some of these other offensive-minded coaches that have a deeper track record of like true prominent success. I would be even more open-minded to the Saints with Kellen Moore, although definitely nowhere near at the levels of even like a Kevin O'Connell, but a Shane Steichen, who the one question mark I have about him is not of his ability to be an offensive mind, but for him to be the offensive mind and the head coach. I think at this point, that's kind of fair with the Colts, but he also has, he hasn't had quarterback success, but I believe in Shane Steichen. And I also think Shane Steichen has the personality that would be able to connect with a Shedeur Sanders. Not saying that they're going to draft him, but like I said, I'm purposely trying to find other offensive coaches that are not like of the level of an Andy Reid. Even Sean McVay is almost unfair because I think, Sean McVay is arguably the second best offensive coach in the NFL in terms of like the true like X's and O's and scheming and, setting up a quarterback to truly be maximizing success. I think a Shedeur Sanders with the Ben Johnson, maybe not first year head coach Ben Johnson, but Ben Johnson was the OC. So that's why probably, if you really think about it, the best spot that he could go to would probably be the Cleveland Browns with Stefanski. I think they could have a lot of success there. I think, though, we would still have to kind of question if Stefanski's good at developing a young quarterback. I firmly believe in Kevin Stefanski's ability to win with like an already established quarterback. And I believe in him as an offensive mind. But I think, I talk about this a lot, that they're all kind of different skill sets. It's kind of what makes Andy Reid such an amazing coach, is that he can not only develop someone, but then he can also maximize someone who already has this talent. And that's not always one of the same. It's not always the same thing. Kevin O'Connell might be an awesome coach at bringing up a quarterback who's like kind of good and turning him into great. He might not be great at maximizing an already elite quarterback. He might not be. Time will tell in that regard. But it's just, it's not one of the same thing always. So, but if I had to pick someone that wasn't like an obvious, Sean McVay, Andy Reid, etc., I feel like it would probably be Kevin Stefanski. Bruce said he loves him in New York, but I'm like, I don't see the stability there. I like Brian Dable, but like I'm not seeing the stability. I mean, it feels like at any moment this team is just gone, and they're signing Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and I'm kind of just like, what the heck? And they might draft a quarterback. Then I just question, like, what are they even doing at this point? Like, what? So like I wouldn't love him in New York by any stretch of the imagination. And I honestly think that Shedeur Sanders would have the potential to get lost in New York. I really do. And that's not a knock on Shedeur. I'd get lost in New York if I was that age and I got drafted top 3 and was making a gajillion dollars. Now I'm playing for the New York Giants. Like, make no mistake about it, that's not an easy thing just to casually do, especially when you're already this massive personality and super popular player like a Shedeur Sanders. It's what some of these other players, even like the Patrick Mahomes of the world, had the advantage of. They weren't already superstars going into the NFL. Shedeur Sanders is already a superstar. And it just has the potential to only get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think going to a little bit more reserved of a market would definitely benefit him. But yeah, Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh, the city, would be good for him, but I'm just not so sure of the vision of the Pittsburgh Steelers, quite frankly. And yeah, I'm not 100% confident that the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers would be able to bring along Shedeur Sanders. I'm just that I have such question marks about him. And although Travis O'Shea, from subscriber of the channel, who I always reference a lot, he's really high on him. I'm conflicted. I go back and forth. 1 minute I really like him as an offensive mind. The next minute I'm like, I have doubts. And anytime I have doubts about something and someone has the counterpoint to that, like someone like Travis or anyone who's, regularly I'm interacting with in the comment section, then that kind of gives me pause. And I'm kind of like, well, am I wrong in this situation? And, it's tough. He hasn't had great quarterbacks necessarily. He hasn't had bad quarterbacks either. But I don't know. I feel I got a little bit of PTSD of how that offense was for the Pittsburgh Steelers, quite frankly. And I'm not so sure if he's the type of coach who could command a Shedeur Sanders. I think you need an incredibly confident, rooted, and experienced and credentialed offensive coach for Shedeur Sanders. Because I think Shedeur Sanders will be the one who could just eat you up. If you're even remotely unsure of yourself, or remotely if you don't carry some weight, if your name doesn't already carry some weight, I think Shedeur Sanders will eat you up. I really do. So that's why I feel as though someone that just has more weight to them, who can literally just be like, Shedeur, shut up and listen to me. I'm talking, eyes up here. I really believe that that's something that Shedeur is going to need. That's who his father is. In a lot of way, right? I mean, that's literally who his father's personality, especially from a coaching perspective, is very much like that. Obviously, we don't know what happens behind closed doors when they're actually in their home, but from a coaching perspective, that is very much who Deion Sanders is. And so, I feel like he would need a version of that to a degree, which is why Mike Tomlin is good, but I fear that Mike Tomlin is starting to lose some of that. Some of that bravado a little bit, some of that aura that Mike Tomlin used to have. And again, that's what happens when you haven't won a playoff game in nearly a decade. It's just the way it goes, man. The younger guys, they don't care what you did in 2014, because at this point they were 10 years old. They were like, oh, remember when the Steelers won back in 2010 or whatever it was? They were like, yeah, I was 9, I kind of remember that Super Bowl. I was probably in the basement running around with my friends or something, doing God knows what. So those things start to hit differently. Yeah, I am curious to see where Shedeur finally goes. Normally sliding wouldn't be such a big deal, but since they would say, oh, if he slides, it's kind of better. It eases up some expectations. Again, Shedeur Sanders is such a popular person that I think even if he was the last pick in the draft, the expectations are still going to be through the roof. They're still going to treat him, Shedeur, essentially like a number 1 overall pick, no matter where he's drafted. That's just the problem of already being a celebrity before you even enter the NFL. And having a father like Coach Prime, being a celebrity as well. It's kind of like Bronny. Whether Bronny was the last pick of the draft or the number 1 overall pick, all eyes are on him. That's what Shedeur Sanders is going to have. So a slide doesn't even protect him from even kind of this expectations. So it's going to be interesting. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about Shedeur Sanders potentially sliding to the Steelers? Out of all 32 teams, minus probably the Kansas City Chiefs and Andy Reid and the Philadelphia Eagles and the 2 reigning Super Bowl champions, where do you think the best spot would be for him to go. Also a Shanahan, but I don't think they're going to be drafting him. But let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. It's whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.